other side of the ball, when you talk about the state offense, could be a little bit of a different story depending on the half of the game. So, first half was not great. First half was ugly from the offense. They didn't execute, man. You simply just committed a lot of dumb penalties. Blocking up front was poor. Pass protection was not totally horrid. There were a few times, though, that guys definitely got beat and Shapen was in trouble, I think especially in the first half. But it was more like even in the run game, when you had numbers to run, you didn't have a ton of success doing it. But the penalties are the bigger thing for me. And it's not just offensive. The full game, it was 14 penalties for 119 yards, I think. Most of those on the offense. Most of those happening in moments where it's like, okay, we had a good play. Never mind. And that was a big issue a year ago. And that's what bothers me a lot is I understand week one of the season, there's going to be some execution issues. You're going to have some mistakes. But there is a point to be had that, like, when you have 2 years in a row of this being a repeated issue, that starts to become like, are you concerned about discipline with the team? Now, and they mostly cleaned it up in the second half. They found a little bit of a groove, but still had a few of those errors get in the way. The offensive line, I'm worried about that group a lot. Blake Steen did not look good at right tackle. I know we've already kind of referenced it a few times here in the chat. He had some bad penalties, and he had some looks where he got whipped against a defensive front that he should be able to have an edge. That wasn't a good look, man. And if that's going to be your starting guy at right tackle, that's concerning. Now, obviously, he gets hurt, and in the second half, you put Albert Reese over to right tackle, put Jimothy Lewis at left. I thought they played a little bit better. That was a little better from what you saw. And look, you didn't have Luke work today, which limited your ability to rotate a little bit. You know, if he gets healthy, what does that look like? But O-line as a whole, though, was still a bit concerning. Like, there are times where they've got 5 blockers against 5 guys in the box, or 6 versus 6, and that Southern Miss's defenders are winning those battles up front. And I understand sometimes it's a case of the defense makes a good call, and they're slanting or stunning one way, and your guys weren't ready for it, and you get beat. I get it. Even being the bigger, stronger, more physical team doesn't automatically mean you're 100% going to win every single rep up front. It happens. But it was happening far too frequently in this game that Southern Miss was able to have success stopping State in the run game. I thought a lot of State's success running the football, like last year, it was State's running backs making plays. It wasn't that the offensive line was blocking it up perfectly. It's that State's running backs were making plays. And thank God you've got some really good running backs who can provide that. But you can't trust that week in, week out. Like, you've got to have better blocking up front. And that's a concern for me, obviously, because Southern Miss, I know if you talk to Southern people, they really like their defensive line and they like their linebackers and they think they got a good group. By Sun Belt standards, they probably do. Mississippi State's not looking for Sun Belt standards. Mississippi State still has to go up against Arizona State that's got some good pieces in the defensive front. They got to go up against Tennessee, who is very good in the defensive front. Texas, Georgia, Texas A&M. I know Ole Miss is losing a lot, but like Ole Miss has some very talented pieces on that defensive line. Florida's got some studs up front. Missouri has got some studs up front. I think Arkansas is the only team State's playing this year where so far we don't know that they've got dudes on the defensive line. They did last year, and they have the last few years, but this year they're replacing a lot there. That worries me for State's chances offensively because we saw it last year. If your offensive line is bad, there's only so much you can do. Yes, is Jeff Levy always going to find a way to be able to scheme open some guys downfield and give you put some points on the board? Sure. And look, maybe this year if the defense is legitimately better, maybe that's enough to find a win here or there. But I really need to see that offensive line get better. I recognize you had a couple guys out there starting between Steen and Owens that got here in preseason camp. They weren't here through the spring. It's going to be a process. And outside of Arizona State, you get a couple games with Alcorn and Northern Illinois that theoretically you could sort some things out. But, I mean, look, you get Arizona State in week 2, right? So that's a concern that you're going to be losing – that you're going up against a team with a very good defensive front right away when you got an offensive line that's clearly not settled. And that worries me for what this team is going to be going forward. We'll talk about the running backs real quick here. Because it was a really good game for them. Devon Booth and Fluff Bothwell combined for Okay, see, they changed the stats for what I was looking at on ESPN, but 16 carries for 79 yards and a touchdown for Booth, 9 for 43 and 2 scores for Bothwell. They both had some really nice runs. Obviously, good to see both of them get in the end zone. Those guys are going to be thunder and lightning for you this year. It was great to be able to lean on them and see them be featured. Johnny Daniels, obviously limited touches in this game because of Bothwell stepping in, but 4 carries for 28 yards, 7 yards a pop, including one of the best runs I've seen where it doesn't get blocked up front. Well, okay, I should take that back. It wasn't blocked up front because there was a free runner because it was 6 in the box versus 5 and 5 blockers, and Chapin chose to hand it off instead of RPO. And I think he made the wrong read there. Johnny Daniels, though, makes that guy miss and then turns into a big run. Like, that was very impressive to see out of him. So, man, we knew these running backs could be really good. You saw it in this game. The State should be able to run the ball pretty effectively on the day. 188 yards, 4.6 a carry. Ideally would have liked that to have been a little bit higher. You would have liked your top guys to be over 5 yards a rush. That kind of goes back to where that offensive line not being great up front impacts things a little bit. But overall, the running back room, that's a good group. You can lean on them. So, passing game-wise, I thought Blake Shapen was fine. I know there was a comment earlier talking about people on social media, already hating on Shapen, and that's a bit overblown. And look, I agree. I didn't see too much hate, but I definitely saw a few people calling for the change in quarterback, which we can talk about here in a sec. But look, Shapen 26 of 34, so 76%, 270 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. The interception wasn't great. He just didn't see the linebacker. Linebacker drops, and he's going to his second read there with Traore and just doesn't see the linebacker dropping, and throws a pick. And could have been a really bad situation considering where you were on the field. Luckily, the defense stepped up there. So that wasn't ideal, but otherwise, I thought Shapen mostly did what you would want him to do. I mean, again, the RPO stuff, there was maybe a couple times that you would have liked to have seen him either hand it off or pull it or whatever, but I thought Shapen played a fine game. I thought he did what he was asked to do within the offense. It was very game manager-esque, but it's not like he was having a ton put on his shoulders. Passing game as a whole, if I were to nitpick, I mean, the lack of explosiveness downfield was a bit of a concern. Obviously, they hit the 55-yard score to Seydu on the 6th play of the game. And you have a couple other big plays, both Anthony Evans and Brendan Thompson get some big run after catch, but the key is run after catch. Kind of those intermediate throws and then those guys making plays. And, look, 7 catches for 92 for Thompson, 5 for 77 for Traore, but again, 55 of that happens on one play. 4 for 36 for Evans. He's a few times wasn't really able to shake open. And then a few other guys, just a few catches here or there. There's potential with that group for sure, but you wanted to see more explosiveness down the field. And I know Southern Miss, they like their secondary. They feel like they got a good group there. Monton is a stud. Foster at nickel is a good player. And they definitely were, I would say, much of the game trying to limit State's ability to take shots down the field, although there were plenty of times that they were giving State single high coverage. And if you get single high in this offense, man, you really want to be able to take those shots. And it just felt like those weren't getting open. Obviously, I don't have the all 22, so I can't tell you for sure because going off a TV broadcast, you don't get a great look of what's happening. But I know Shapen's not afraid to pull the trigger and throw it downfield if he's got a guy open, and felt like he was going underneath quite a bit with the passes. And a lot of those throws to receivers on the outside, it was guys on comebacks as opposed to verticals, which says they couldn't win deep. Some of that may just be the coverage Southern Miss was playing. They weren't letting them get behind, but I'd have liked to have seen more explosiveness in the passing game. And, it was a complaint for me a season ago that they were so reliant on explosive plays. If they didn't hit a big play, they didn't have a chance to move the ball. They didn't have a chance to score. They had to hit those big plays in order to be successful because they couldn't sustain drives. We saw in this game them sustain drives. That is a positive. The concern is that this is a team where you felt like you should have had a lot of explosive plays, and realistically, over the course of a season, you've got to be able to hit those explosive plays if you're going to be talking about really consistently putting points on the board. There's got to be there's a balance to it. You can't just be everything is 5 yards, 4, 5, 6 yards, just quick little dump offs. and then trusting that you're going to execute over the course of a long drive. As I talked about when I talked about State's defense against Southern Miss, like most teams can't do that. But you also can't just live and die off of explosives. You got to be able to be a little bit more consistent. So hopefully they can find those explosives going forward. But look, when they were executing and they weren't shooting themselves in the foot, the offense was pretty much fine. Now, the one thing people were interested in, Kamario Taylor gets a few opportunities in there. Didn't think we would see it. Honestly, I wasn't really expecting that, but it makes a lot of sense. Look, Jeff Lebby likes to run his quarterbacks in short yardage and goal line situations. That's kind of a big part of what he wants to do, especially because he tends to get receivers that are receiving types. Oh, sorry, not receivers. Tight ends that are more receiving types as opposed to blockers. And if you're going to have a tight end that's more of a receiver that limits what he can do as a blocker, that means when you're in short yardage situations, just handing it off to the running back, if your quarterback is also not a dual threat, it's kind of tough to consistently move the chains. So having a quarterback that could be a factor in the run game helps you out quite a bit there. And we know Shapen is a willing runner, but he is not a powerful runner, and he doesn't need to be running this year because of the injury. So it makes sense that the guy who is your best athlete is Kamario Taylor. And look, it lets you get him involved. He is a special athlete. You could set up some really cool plays with him, and it gives you a chance, this guy who's a borderline 5-star, to get him on the field for your offense. Like, I think that's a good thing to see. And yeah, I think that's a package you'll have to definitely see going forward. I saw some people saying we should see more of it, and I actually kind of agree. And I know I've pushed back against the whole Kamario should be a starter mentality, and I still push back against that. I don't think you should be starting Kamario Taylor over Blake Shapen. Shapen played fine today. He did what he was asked to do. It was very game manager-esque, but I will take game manager-esque, assuming they can get better protection up front. But with some of those concerns for the offensive line, if you're talking about being able to convert in short yardage, like, yeah, you might need to turn to Taylor here or there to be able to find some ways to move the ball on the ground and especially convert down in the red zone. If you're talking about, we have Kamario Taylor and Fluff Bothwell as two power runners, that's something that I think you absolutely have to take. And look, you also add in, he got Braylon Burnside. Stonka gets some snaps or got a snap lined up as a Wildcat quarterback. And it was cool to get him on the field as well. You're seeing them get the playmakers involved. Obviously, Stonka playing more of defense this year, which I don't really know if I'm sure he did play, but I didn't remember him making any plays defensively. But it was cool to get him involved. Kamario needs more time to learn before he becomes a starter, but he can help us win games. I agree. Like, yeah, you don't want to be turning the offense over to him at this point. Unless you think he can do full-on what we saw from Jackson Earl the other night, which is just, hey, man, tuck it and run and make something happen, because that's what Arnold was doing against Baylor for Auburn. It wasn't like he was doing much of anything special. It was more just like, I'm finding ways to run here. And maybe Taylor can bring you some of that, and maybe you reach a point of the season where you need that boost. But I think he's someone that you can get involved in the offense. If there were something I was going to come away concerned with outside of the sloppiness, which let me say on that, I am willing to pass off some of the game one sloppiness to that it is game one. Some of those penalties are a product of week one. Some of those issues are a product of you're on the road to open the season. You got an offensive line that's still coming together. Although I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, the O-line penalties of them not aligning in the backfield, inexcusable. You get 3 of those in one game, insane. I understand, like, every tackle does it. They try to cheat that as much as they can. But the first time it gets called in a game, as an offensive line coach, and yes, I know they showed Levy and Loadholt ripping into the offensive lineman on the sidelines. I get it. They showed that. But if your guys are continually doing it, that's something you need to have addressed. That's like, you can't, either they're not listening to you at all, which is a problem, or you're not actually addressing that problem the way you need to. William says the illegal formations were asinine. Look, it's borderline, but at the same time, it's the rule. And it's something that last year they were emphasizing and saying, we're not going to keep letting offensive tackles be a full yard behind the center in the backfield. We're going to start calling a penalty if you don't have them up on the line. And look, you're someone who loves offense. That is an advantage for the offense, and a lot of the rules work against the defense. So I'll side with the defense there. It's something like your offensive lineman should be able to get up on the line. Like, you get a little bit of cheat. You get to be like halfway. You get to be like on the center's waist or whatever. Or like, I think it's got to be helmet on the center's waist, something like that. You get that. Get up on the line. And that should not have happened in this game 3 different times. That cannot happen. But going back to like the whole week 1 thing, I'm willing to pass off some of the issues that it is week 1. But again, the lack of explosive plays, including the run game as well. They didn't have a lot of big runs. Booth had a couple nice ones. Daniels did as well. But you would have liked to have seen those 30, 40-yard sprints down the field. You just didn't really get it. I think State finished with 5.88 yards per carry. Or yards per play offensively. Not good enough. That number needs to be higher. So this offense, again, you've got to find more explosive plays, both in the passing game and in the run game going forward. Again, not the cleanest game from State offensively, but once they locked in, I mean, look, that third quarter, 21 points, 200 yards, you'll take it all day. If you get play like that consistently, you start to feel really good about what this team can be going forward.